Good evening. We'll call this meeting to order. Council has decided that has approved holding a series of committee of the whole meetings to discuss the city's infrastructure needs and specifically the issue of the accommodation for the Prince Rupert Fire Department and the Prince Rupert RCMP. Councillor Joy. So I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Howley, please, for some more instruction.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you say, Council has arranged a series of meetings over the next few months. The next one will be on April the 2nd, the third on May the 7th, the fourth on June the 4th, and a wrap-up meeting on June the 18th. Excuse me. The format for this evening is that we will have a presentation from Mr. Horn on the public works and building infrastructure of the city and some of the needs there. Then Inspector Kilbury will give us a report on the state of the RCMP building. And thirdly, Fire Chief Dave McKenzie will give us a state of the fire department and its facilities. We also have an opportunity for the public to phone in and ask questions, and I'll have that telephone number up on the screen in a minute. Also, people can email in questions they may have. The format will be that we'll have the presentations, and after each presentation, we'll allow some time for questions from the members of the public who are here this evening, and then we'll deal with any telephone or email questions that we may have received. And then following that, we'll move on to the second presentation and repeat the process until we're finished. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Horn to come forward and make his presentation.
Good evening, Your Worship. I have Richard Pucci here with me. He's the engineering coordinator, and myself, I'm Bill Horn. I'm the I'm the general manager of Public Works Engineering Services and Department Development Services. We're going to put a presentation on here today. It's fairly extensive. It's a little longer. It's about 20 minutes long. So we're going to go over a number of things. We're going to have a slide presentation here, as well as I'm going to read from my reports here, and they'll kind of coincide with each other. So we might as well start here. So this presentation is a review of the current state of our infrastructure. We provide a general overview of the infrastructure components that are critical and identify the items in need of repair or replacement. The infrastructure review in this presentation is related to water supply, transportation, sanitary and storm systems, garbage collection, parks, solid waste, civic buildings. We'll start here with the water system. The city's water system is capable of supplying 10 million gallons of potable water per day, which can support large commercial users and a population of 25,000 people or more. The city collects raw water from the dam at Woodworth Lake. It is piped by gravity to the treatment facility located at the lower end of Shawatons Lake. The treated water is then piped through two 24-inch supply mains under Fern Passage to the booster pump station and reservoirs at Montreal Circle. The water is then distributed by smaller pipe supply mains and distribution lines to the residents, businesses, and industrial facilities. There is an emergency backup water supply at the lower end of Shawatons Lake, which consists of a pumping station adjacent to the water treatment facility.
Mr. Horn, I just wanted to interrupt for just a sec, if I could. The telephone number for those at home is 250-627-8659, and it should be on your computer screen as well. And the email, or your television screen rather, the email address is dan, dan.rodin, R-O-D-I-N, at princerupert.ca. Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Horn.
Thank you. Raw water supply. It has been determined that the most vulnerable component of the city's infrastructure is the dam and 2.2 kilometers of the raw water supply. The Woodworth Lake Dam is 100 years old and requires some major repairs to the spillway and further assessment for replacement. The 2.2 kilometers of 100-year-old water supply from the dam needs to be replaced due to its age and vulnerable location. With the line replacement, an access road to the dam will be constructed to reduce maintenance and increase the overall safety of the water supply. The 2011 dam safety audit, as required by legislation, rated the dam's condition to be fair, and they identified a number of items that needs to be corrected to be in compliance. We are working with engineering consultants with respect to these repairs. Other projects which are to be considered for future capital improvements are replacement of the 1967 Fern Passage submarine water line. Fortunately, in the event of a line failure, there are 2 submarine crossings which will prevent losing the water supply to the city completely, but may reduce capacity. The Fern Passage line is the one on the lower side of those black lines up there. Scheduled replacement of older than 1920 supply mains, such as on 6th Avenue East and West and in the downtown core. Replacement of water distribution lines that are failing and in need of continual repair. Well over half the system is 50 years old, and 14% is 90 years old. And as you can see by the slide, you can see the distribution of the lines, of the age of the lines, when they were installed. 51 to 1960 seemed to be the construction period for the city. A number of distribution mains that are in need of replacement are located in the early developed areas of the city and should be replaced in conjunction with sewer and roadworks. Water treatment and emergency pumping. The quality of our water is considered to be very good due to the good land management practices used in the watershed. However, upcoming changes in the federal and provincial standards will require more advanced treatment for potable water. The city's backup water supply at Shawano's Lake. A pump station draws water from the lake by means of electric and diesel pumps. The pump equipment is from the 1950 to 1960 era. They are far from being energy efficient, and some parts are no longer available. Upgrades are required. Water system capacity. The water consumption in the city has been on a steady decline since the mid-1990s due to the declining population and less demand by high users, such as fish processing. We now find our system has significant surplus capacity, which leads to water quality issues, which is maintained by regular flushing of large amounts of water. We don't flush that much water, but it's I guess if you added it all up, it might be close to that. A study is being done this year to determine the cost-effective way to maintain the water quality levels, either by circulation pumps, valving, or additional storage with secondary disinfection. Now we move on to transportation. The city is responsible for maintaining approximately 60 kilometers of various types of road surfacing, which are funded by general revenue. The transportation department budget includes repair and maintenance of curbs, roads, bridges, sidewalks, stairs, retaining walls, walkways, parking lots, storm drainage, snow plowing, and street sweeping. Road paving program. Based on the average life expectancy of asphaltic pavement, the city should be repaving 2 kilometers of road annually. The roads used by public transit or heavy trucks wear out more frequently. Approximately 32 kilometers of road is used by both heavy trucks and transit buses. A good paving program can actually save monies in the long term if it's spent in conjunction with road rehabilitation. Bridges. The city's road network has 4 bridges. 3 of these bridges are wooden trestles located on 6th Avenue, 2nd Avenue, West, and in Cow Bay. And the 4th is a steel and concrete bridge at the Civic Center. The 3 wooden trestle bridges are beyond their projected life expectancy. These bridges are in need of replacement, or alternately, rerouting could be considered. A full engineering study is being considered to report on the options and costs. Retaining walls. We have a large number of rock retaining walls. Unfortunately, rock walls are unstable by nature. A number of large and small rock walls are in questionable state of stability. These retaining walls need to be addressed before they fail. Unfortunately, retaining wall replacement is costly, and large walls require structural engineering. In the meantime, these walls will continue to require substantial ongoing maintenance, and with our available budget, it is difficult to meet the maintenance requirements. Road rehabilitation. The need to rehabilitate a road is based on a number of factors related to the condition of the road and existing utilities. If the pavement surface is broken up or settled and the utilities are near or past the life expectancy, road rehabilitation is needed. We continue to work on the road rehabilitation program based on the 2005 Associated Engineering 10-year plan, which identified these roads in priority, to which 9th Avenue East is included and is proceeding this year. Storm sewer system. Maintenance of the storm sewer system is dependent on the road budget. With minimal funding available and operational costs increasing, the maintenance suffers. We have a schedule for cleaning drains, but the frequency is lacking due to the equipment availability and manpower. Storm drainage improvements usually go hand in hand with major capital rehabilitation program. The Department of Fisheries and the Ministry of Environment would like the city to install oil, water, and silt separators prior to discharging into the receiving environment, which is a practice we do in new construction. Sanitary and combined sewer and sewer collection. The City of Prince Rupert has 10 major sanitary sewer catchment areas which have individual outfalls that discharge into the Prince Rupert Harbor. Of these 10 major catchment areas, 6 are combined sewers. Sanitary sewage collection is made up of services, collection system, lift stations, trunk sewers, and outfalls. The sewage waste is picked up from the property line by means of service connections. The service connection is connected to a collection system that flows to larger trunk sewers and finally to a treatment plant / outfall. In the City of Prince Rupert's case, all but one sewer system flows directly to the ocean. A combined sewer collects and combines sanitary sewer with storm drainage from road drains, private property, ditches, and discharges directly to ocean outfalls. The problem with combined sewers is the large diameter pipe required to handle the drainage flows. In low flow situations, the system can vent sewage odors through the storm drains. It carries silt and debris that enters from the drains and ditches, and stormwater makes sewage treatment impossible. In the late 1970s up to the early 1990s, the city was receiving regular funding from the province to separate the combined sewer system. The city also had a $2 million road renewal program at the time. Due to the funding restraints and the downturn of the economy in the early 90s, these programs were discontinued. The types of piping that make up sewer system varies from wood stave, clay tile, concrete, steel, and PVC, with an array of sizes from 6-inch to 48-inch. The date of installation is not well documented, but it is known that approximately 45% of the system was installed before 1960, and much of that was during the Second World War. Unfortunately, the pre-1960 installation utilized some standard materials and workmanship by today's standards. Sewage treatment. The city has one sewage treatment facility located in Prince Rupert's Industrial Park. It was constructed in the mid-1970s and was state-of-the-art at the time, but now at 40 years old it needs significant upgrades. In the early 1970s, the city installed a number of commuter stations on one major outfall. These stations ground the sewage before it was discharged into the ocean. This process is no longer thought of as any type of acceptable sewage treatment. Future federal legislation may require the city to install treatment facilities, which will be very expensive. To construct 10 treatment plants would be cost prohibitive. Therefore, a number of outfalls will have to be combined together, likely requiring additional sewage lift station. Until the liquid waste management plan has been finalized, the city will not know what the estimated cost is anticipated to be. Sewage lift stations. An integral component of the city's sanitary sewage collection system is the 11 lift stations which serve to overcome the intense terrain of the city where gravity lines do not work. A new station has recently been completed as part of the Hayes Creek relocation project. Some of the upgrades to the existing stations include emergency backup power and reduction of groundwater infiltration. At least 6 of these stations require work to outdated control systems, more efficient pumps, and resealing of the wet wells. Annual sewer line replacement. Sewer piping has an expected lifespan to 60 to 80 years if properly installed. As the city has approximately 90 kilometers of sanitary sewer, the annual replacement should be about 1.1 kilometers per year. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years, the city has only replaced 5 kilometers. The majority of this combined system are in the downtown core. and the older section of the city. Replacement of combined sewer is difficult and expensive due to the logistics of separating the storm drains, and the property owners serviced by combined sewers will have to incur costs to separate their storm drainage from their building sewer. Move on to parks. The Parks Department is funded by general revenue and is responsible for a wide variety of public services. These services include, but not limited to, parks, tot lots, trails, green spaces, ball fields, gardens, city buildings, hanging baskets, gardens, trees, and downtown cleanup. It is unfortunate the department seems to receive the brunt of the cuts when economic times get tough. However, the citizens have a need to have the community look tidy and presentable. Litter pickup, parks and gardens, playfields, and green spaces suffer from reduced maintenance. Over the last 5 years, we have received annual reduction of parks funding, which has resulted in reduced staff and less seasonal staff for summer maintenance. In the last 4 years, the city has increased the amount of green space maintained by approximately 10%. For example, the Waterfront Trail, Hayes Creek Trail, the grass spaces near the Atlan Terminal. All these new improvement needs additional monies to keep maintained and safe. We've tried reducing the number of banners and hanging baskets to assist in reducing operating costs, but now we have more than we did prior to the reduction. We reduced grass cutting in the fields, but due to safety concerns and concerns from the user groups, we had to reinstate the schedules. Tot lots. We have reduced the number of tot lots, not due to cutbacks, but to the age and unsafe condition of the equipment. The 3 tot lots scheduled for closure this year are Seal Cove, Borden Street, and Gyro Park, but the space will be maintained as green spaces. The strategy now is to maintain the 6 remaining tot lots to the highest standard possible, although some will need upgrading to do so. The remaining tot lots will include George Casey, Raven, 10th Avenue East, Mariners Park, Moose Tot Lot, and Westview Park. Ball fields, skateboard park, and tennis courts. Field maintenance is expensive when you consider the cost of fencing repairs, turf maintenance, and our climate. The tennis courts on 2nd Avenue and McBride that were refurbished for the 1997 Senior Games need to be resurfaced. The skateboard park needs to have some features updated, and the area where the Kinhut was torn down requires landscaping. Kootenai and Seal Cove fields have not been maintained for 5 years and will continue not to be maintained until funding is available. Move on to solid waste. Garbage collection. We still continue to have issues with homeowners not using garbage cans, which we see as just an ongoing issue. We are in the process of working with the regional district in Port Edwin and reviewing the possibility of residential recycling program. There are a number of things to consider before implementing a recycling program, such as cost and logistics. Landfill operations. The city landfill is located about 8 kilometers from downtown on Ridley Island Road. The landfill refuse is deposited into an engineered landfill site, and once filled to capacity, it is capped with impermeable material, and another site phase is open. Currently, the existing landfill site is nearing capacity. Adjacent to the landfill, there is a site we use for storing recyclables such as metals, burnable wood waste, and a muskeg dump. Some of the muskeg is reused for landfill cover material, while the scrap metal is separated and sold to the recyclers at the going rate per ton. The wood waste is burnt, and the remaining ash is deposited in the landfill at a later time. This is all done to reduce space consumption at the landfill. The city is also making financial provisions for the eventual landfill closure and site restoration, as per the ministry's regulations. We also continue to monitor the old garbage dump off Wantage Road, which was closed in 1991. Landfill expansion. This development includes rock removal, installation of a leachate collection system, and a liner. It constitutes a major infrastructure investment that will be phased over a number of years. For every cubic meter of rock removed creates a cubic meter of airspace. At the completion of the expansion, the city will be removing approximately 300,000 cubic meters of rock and muskeg. This additional airspace created will allow the city to operate the landfill for another 25 to 30 years beyond its original design projection. The intent to continue with the expansion and strive to a portion of The intent is to continue with the expansion and strive to have a portion of the next phase open in the next 2 or 3 years, and it will be contingent on available funding. The facilities are in reasonable condition with some upgrades needed due to deterioration. The wheel wash system, which has been out of service for some time, is being reinstated. A number of rusted out containers are scheduled to be replaced, and we will be repaving around the scale in public area. For the reasons of public safety, we are reviewing the installation of a new container located for burnable wood waste and metals for recycling. A swap shed is also being considered. The power lines which supply power to the facility's pump station and treatment lagoon at the landfill need to be upgraded and in some places relocated. Treatment facilities. To be able to meet the discharge regulations, we expect that the upgrades to the treatment lagoon will be required in the foreseeable future. We are working with engineers to determine the best and most economical solution. The leachate pump station located next to the active landfill site requires upgrading or possible replacement in the future. Civic buildings. Civic buildings repair and maintenance and upgrades are funded through general revenue. The purpose of these buildings is for governance, recreation, and other civic uses. City Hall was built in the 1930s and was originally the federal building, then in the 60s converted to the current City Hall. The building has a heritage appeal due to its unique architecture, and it is in structurally good condition. This building will be repainted. 20 new windows will be installed as per the window replacement program, and bathroom fixtures are to be replaced, and repairs will be completed to the roof and retaining wall on the east side of the building this year. Future consideration is the replacement of the elevator, which has been identified to have a questionable operating reliability and parts are no longer available. Civic Center. Recreation complex was built in 1971. It is in reasonable structural condition. Upgrades are required for the heating and ventilation system, which we are proceeding to do. And future consideration is for a dehumidifier in the arena, doors, and interior accessibility. The pool complex was built in 1980 and is in good structural condition. Upgrades in the heating and ventilation system are being done in conjunction with the Civic Center. There's a crack in the pool which continues to be monitored, but so far it has not been an issue. The building needs paint. Woodwork and windows will need replacing in the coming years. The Leicester Center for the Performing Arts was built in the late 1980s and is in good structural condition. The stage and carpeting was replaced late last year through funding from the Prince Rupert Port Authority. The building does not require any major repairs, but maintenance needs to be done to keep the building in good condition. The library was built in the 1970s and expanded in the 1980s, and the building is good structural condition. There are no issues with the building, with the exception the size of the building is smaller than the needs of the library. Public Works Building. The two buildings in the Public Works Yard were constructed in the mid-50s and they are in poor condition. They are prefabricated steel buildings and do not have any insulation in the walls or ceilings. Therefore, heating is an issue. And the two Public Works buildings are the two on the top of that, where the pointer is there now. The ones on the other side below it are the storage shed, and one is the CityTel building. The structural engineering report confirms that the insulation cannot be installed unless the roof structure is upgraded for snow loading. There are numerous roof leaks and the metal cladding is rusting away. Engineering work has been done on one of the buildings and structural repairs are being considered for this year. There are other buildings and storage areas that the public work uses, such as the greenhouse at the cemetery, which we have not addressed in this report. We haven't reviewed those. The fire hall and the RCMP buildings are not considered in this report, as they will discuss later on in this meeting. And in conclusion to this, we do understand the stress of the tax burden and the fees for services for the citizens of Prince Rupert, and concerns about making investments in large capital improvements. In some of the projects we have identified in this report may not be financially viable without help from the province and the federal governments for funding opportunities, and we will be going after those wholeheartedly. We hope that we provided you with a general overview of the state of our infrastructure. And do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Bill. I get tired just listening to all that. We got a lot to do. Any member of council have any questions for the senior staff? Councillor Thorkelson?
What do you think is the out of that list that you gave us, what do you think is the most concerning to you? Not ongoing maintenance, such as ongoing road, but just in looking at all the projects, which ones are most concerning to you?
We've identified that the water system is our most critical. The raw water supply line to the city is probably the most vulnerable to any kind of catastrophe that could happen. The dam is old. It's got the spalding on the back of the spillway is all coming. It's got a concrete surface and it's all coming off. It needs to be repaired, but we can't get to it. The only way to get there is by foot or by helicopter. So, without an access road to construct stuff like infrastructure like that, it's almost impossible. When they built it originally, they used to have a railway there, which is all gone, rusted away, and most of the road has disappeared.
Councillor Torkelson?
So how much do you estimate the cost would be, Mr. Horn?
We haven't really put costs in this report, but I can tell you that the infrastructure, we did the lower section in 1995. We spent $5 million on that with the infrastructure grant from the province and the federal government. And that did about 3 kilometers of road and an access road. This area is probably a little more rugged, and we estimate that cost to be about $6 million.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Pucci.
Your Worship, perhaps some members of the public have questions.
Is there any member from the public that would like to ask any questions of Mr. Horn, please? Yes, sir.
Your Worship, could you have the people come forward?
Could you come forward and use the mic so we're on television so they can hear you out there, please? Thank you.
Gray, how much of this work or proposed work would be contracted out, and how much would be done by City Works itself?
If it's major capital infrastructure, most of that would be contracted out. Anything that we can do inside it would be only minor maintenance work under $250,000 to $300,000. Everything else we would probably send out to contract.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the gallery that would like to speak to Mr. Horn? Okay, if not, yes.
Thank you. Karina Mohart. Basically, my question is also for the City Council to look at is how much of the water is going to the port, to the waterfront there, and are they going to be contributing some funds for this water?
We have a 10-inch water line that goes to the port facility. They pay a user rate like any of the fishing plants or anybody else does, so they pay a fairly significant rate for their water, and it's all built into the rate for infrastructure replacement.
Thank you. Jim.
I just have a question. I noticed that we have a little bit of work going on here down by Frederick Street, and I haven't had any information, but I noticed the road is blocked off on both areas, and I understand and I do know that this is part of the water system. Now, I've brought up in this community for a lot of years, and I'm just trying to figure out that we're trying to understand a railroad going up to Shawalins. There's never been a railroad there. I've been there. I swam in the lake. Come on now. This is, to me, I don't understand. Woodward's Lake, you had to walk a trail. Excuse me. We're talking about stuff here that I all of a sudden seems to be a big problem. If it was such a big problem, then why haven't we dealt with it? Why have we waited so long to do something that should have been done years ago? And to me, you and I know what's going on here is that we are a low population trying to keep up with whatever's going on with the infrastructure. Yeah. And can we afford it? And I haven't seen anything tonight that says that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill, could you answer that for him, please?
for the railway that went up to to Woodworth Lake, that was probably installed in about 1910 or 11, and it was probably decommissioned in probably the 20s or 30s when BC Hydro took over the site from Northern Power. But it went from the top end of Schwatlands Lake all the way through to the dam site, and that's the only way they could get that size of pipe up there. Like, that's 43-inch pipe. It's huge.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Okay.
Hi, I'm Alan Hale. I'm with the Northern View newspaper. So, if you are saying that the water system is in the most critical danger, should the city be spending its money on that rather than an emergency building, in your opinion?
You're putting me on the spot there. I think that the emergency services building is probably as important as any other part of the infrastructure. I think it's council's decision based on the information that's provided to them to decide which is more important. If you're asking me whether the water system is important, sure it is. The sewer system is important, sure it is. But which is the most important? I think it's up to council to decide. I think it's for them to take all the information we can provide them and come up with a good decision.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone else, please? Okay. Thanks again. Mr. Howie, would you like to?
Yes, Your Worship. Next is the RCMP presentation, Inspector Kilberry. And also you'll notice that the public will notice that some members of council aren't here this evening. This is not a regular council meeting evening, and some of the members of council had other commitments, but they will have an opportunity to review all of the information because this entire is being taped, and they'll have an opportunity to review it.
Thank you. Mr. Kilberry.
Good evening. I'm Bob Kilberry. I'm the officer in charge of Prince Rupert Detachment. With me this evening is Vic Steinhammer, who is the operations NCO for the detachment. I'll give you a little overview of why we are where we are today. Basically, the province of British Columbia has a contract with the RCMP to provide provincial policing. Municipalities, in turn, have the option of contracting with the province to have the RCMP provide policing service in their community. When this happens, as in the case of the city of Prince Rupert, the municipality enters into a municipal policing agreement with the province. The agreement sets out the terms and conditions of the policing service, and Article 8 of the agreement speaks to the accommodation. This article outlines what the municipality is required to provide to the police, and 8.1b states, the accommodation referred to in paragraphs 1 through 3 shall be to the satisfaction of the Commissioner and shall meet the security standards of the force. In October 2008, a security review of Prince Rupert Detachment was conducted by members of the RCMP Departmental Security Section. They prepared a report noting a number of significant security deficiencies, and a copy of that report was provided to the city for action. While some improvements have been made since that security review, significant work remains, and on July 18, 2011, the RCMP provided the city with their first official notice of deficiencies in accommodation as prescribed by the Municipal Policing Agreement. This process requires that 3 consecutive annual notices be provided, after which the province has the option of building or securing a new detachment and billing the municipality 100% of the costs. This is not a situation the city wants to find itself in, as they'll have little or no say or control over any decisions made. I will now comment on some of the safety and security deficiencies, but it is not in the public interest to disclose them all. The current municipal strength at Prince Rupert Detachment is 30 police officers, 15 municipal employees, and 2 victim services employees. The maximum number of employees working out of the municipal detachment at any one time is 31, consisting of 18 police officers, 10 municipal employees, and the 2 victim services employees, and 1 public servant. There is insufficient space or room in the building currently to house all our operations. with little or no room for expansion in its current location. There are 12 police officers assigned to Prince Rupert Detachment currently working out of another building due to a lack of space in our existing building. There is insufficient parking at the site for police vehicles, staff parking, and visitors. There is no ability to provide secure parking for our police vehicles as the road runs through the parking lot. It is used by local residents to access the property. Police vehicles must be parked beside the building, creating health and security risks with exhaust fumes coming from vehicles running beside the building, and also the vehicles providing access to the roof. The cell block is probably the biggest security deficiency and safety issue in the building. There's poor ventilation and air exchange within the building, resulting in a number of doors having to be propped open, which creates safety and security concerns in the building. Door locks accessing the cell block and the employee entrance of the detachment do not meet security standards. The current layout of the building makes it impossible to establish defined security zones within the building without making significant alterations. And even if made, the building remains too small for current and future policing needs. You can see there that this is the hallway down to the cell block. You can see that right now that door propped open to allow heat exchange from the back into the hallway into the front of the office. Next stage. The holding cells no longer meet security standards and present a significant risk to employees and persons in our care. The metal bunks and bars on doors represent hazards that can result in serious injury or death of persons in police custody. Last year alone, there were 2 attempted suicides in cells, and without intervention from guards and police, each could have resulted in death. Several walls in the cells are damp and susceptible to mold due to moisture seeping through the walls. You can see in the back corners there where the paint's peeling off. Currently, there are 5 holding cells and 1 sobering cell at the detachment. Given that prisoners must be separated by sex and adult from young offenders, we frequently run out of cell capacity. Each of the holding cells is only designed to house 2 prisoners. Several times throughout the year, we process in excess of 20 prisoners daily, creating overcrowding in an already dangerous holding cell. We have implemented a policy of not accepting provincially remanded prisoners over the weekend. This has resulted in mitigating some of the risk, but it has also reduced revenue that's available to the city because the city collects money for housing provincial prisoners. Last year we had 1,648 prisoners, down from 1,742 in 2010. The cell block should be double its current size to meet capacity and the policing needs and provide a safe and secure environment for our employees as well as the people in our care. The guard station is too small to securely house the required equipment, resulting in some items being loose and readily accessible to persons in the booking area. So when a person comes in to be booked into cells, this is the area where they first come in out of the secure bay, and you can see there's a keyboard, a phone, all these things on the desk that certainly are accessible to anybody coming in that area, and they should all be. There's no place to store them other than on that counter. These items could be used as a weapon and cause injury to our employees or to a prisoner. There's no room for a food preparation area at the guard station, which results in the guard having to leave his or her post to prepare prisoners' meals in another area. Prisoners are not monitored during this period, which places them at unnecessary risk. The secure garage is not really a secure garage, but it's supposed to be. The secure bay is to be just that, a secure area in which the police officer can remove a prisoner from the rear of a police vehicle and escort them to the booking-in area. Security standards require that nothing that could harm a person or could be used as a weapon or aid in escape be located in this area. Our secure bay contains a sink and cleaning supplies, prisoner effects lockers, and even a door to a non-secure area of the building. This is a result of insufficient space to house these material elsewhere in the building and poor building design. The secure interview room should be located in the secure portion of the building, which would be the cell block area, as this is where people in police custody are interviewed by the police. Current building design and space allocation in the cell area does not allow for this, and as a result, the secure interview room is located in the general office. You can see the first arrow on your left. It points down the hallway towards the cell block area, past the front counter of the office, and the 4 arrow on the right-hand side shows you where the interview room is actually located. This means a person in police custody, the guilt of whom has not been determined, is escorted through the general office, past civilian staff and the general public who may be at the service counter. This presents a safety and security hazard for our employees and is unfair for the suspect. The secure interview room is also located very near to an exterior door in the non-secure portion of the building, increasing the opportunity for escape, which places the community at unnecessary risk. Soundproofing in all interview rooms is below acceptable standards, and in some cases may impact on the admissibility of statements in court. The interview room off the reception area is completely unacceptable for interview purposes, as conversations can be heard in the reception area. This is in the men's change room. The building has not been well maintained over the years and has seen a number of water leaks resulting in mold, rot, and paint damage. Here, the paint in the men's change room is blistered on the exterior wall due to moisture seeping through the wall. The women's change room, that is basically the women's change room that you're looking at. It's much too small for the number of staff that we have currently. It has only 8 lockers in it. We currently have 8 female police officers, so it's not really representative of the employee ratios that we now have in today's policing world. The room is much too small, and there's no space at all for any of our administrative support staff to have any storage for any of their personal effects. The detachment has no meeting room or project room or training room. Everything is done in the lunchroom. The employee lunchroom is used to hold daily briefings, but is inadequate for training use or as a project room because there's no means to secure it. In the event of a serious crime, the lunchroom is taken over as a project room in the working area for visiting investigators. It is not efficient as access to this area cannot be controlled. Sensitive materials must be secured any time the room is vacant to maintain the integrity of ongoing investigations. The reception area and front service counter do not meet security standards. The front door is wooden with a large glass window which can easily be broken to gain access to the detachment. The glass barrier window on the front counter does not meet security standards and can be easily defeated. If the glass was to shatter, it could cause serious injury to our employees and members of the general public. While we have migrated to an electronic file system, we are still required to maintain many of the original paper documents which form part of those paperless files. The retention period for many files have increased, resulting in our having to store concluded investigations for longer periods of time, creating file storage problems. We are currently storing many of our older files at an off-site location as there is insufficient space at the detachment. It is not effective or efficient as these files still have to be maintained and results in staff having to travel between both locations to conduct that maintenance. The heating and cooling systems in the detachment no longer operate effectively. To provide enough heat to keep the administrative staff comfortable in the winter, the heat in the cell block area is almost unbearable. In an attempt to balance the heat in the building, administrative staff now have space heaters at their desks, and in the summer there's insufficient airflow within the building and fans need to be installed to move air around to bring temperatures down to an acceptable level. The flat roof design of the building makes it susceptible to leaks, only when it rains. And we've had more than our share of leaks within the building. Air intakes have been covered to prevent air from the parking lot being drawn into the building. With police vehicles parked directly against the building, car exhaust is drawn into the building, causing discomfort for the office staff. Others are covered to restrict airflow, whether it be either too hot in the winter or too cold in either or, in summer or winter. The airflow is definitely a problem within the building itself. The mechanical room are located on the roof of the building and are not readily accessible without going to the lunchroom or the plainclothes investigator's office. This creates security problems as both these areas, in particular the plainclothes investigator's office, contain sensitive information and it is disruptive to have to secure areas whenever repair or maintenance is required. Having said that, maintenance has been lacking with some portions of the heating and cooling system no longer in operation. The exhibit room is too small for our current storage requirements. There's been significant changes in the collection of evidence over the past 30 years. DNA is very prevalent now, and it creates all sorts of problems we have for handling and processing exhibits. Secure drying lockers, refrigeration, and safe processing areas are now a requirement, which is impacted on the space available in the temporary locker. The main exhibit locker is overcrowded, with more exhibits being seized, coupled with longer retention periods for virtually all offenses, even including those in which a conviction has been registered. The existing exhibit locker is too small to meet current and future needs. In conclusion, the current detachment is too small for the current and future policing needs and suffers from so many significant security deficiencies that building a new facility is really the only viable option.
Thank you, Mr. Kilberry. Is there any questions from council? Councillor Judy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Because there aren't enough holding cells, what happens when you have so many offenders that come in, you don't have enough space for them? Are you releasing them back into our city, the less serious ones, or what happens then?
Some we'd look for alternate ways of dealing with them. Some that we may hold, or in a situation we might have held in custody, we will release on some conditions to appear at a later date. Others will look at moving to terrace if they have to be held and space is really a problem. Then we have in the past moved some of our prisoners to terrace or Kitimat.
Thank you. Any other from council? No. Is there anyone from the gallery that would like to speak to the inspector, please? If there is, please come forward and state your name, and we'll go from there. Okay, Mr. Gray.
To have a question. Excuse me, sir. If you have to speak directly into the microphone, or it won't get picked up. Pardon. Our population is about half of it was when that building was constructed. What has changed that dramatically to make that building so unusable, both in size and security? I find it a little incredulous that it was it that inadequate when it was built?
Certainly the security standards have changed significantly. The cell block in particular is so antiquated. There's absolutely, it doesn't even come close to meeting any of the current security standards for a cell block. There can be the elimination of all hanging points is something that's been worked on for years, and the new standard requires that the cell block be built in such a manner that there are no bars any longer in the cell. The bunks are solid, so people can't use them to hang from or to hurt themselves on. So all those things, certainly the security standards have changed significantly and continue to evolve. The space that's in there, we're pretty much the same number of people that we were when that building was built, our strength. But you look at the space required for our administrative staff has increased substantially. I think if I look back, I think I was actually looking back in 1976, and the numbers were about the same, about 30 members working there. But our administrative staff was about 3. So now we're considerably more, and that's the advent of electronic file system that's supposed to make things simpler, but it really has made things more complicated, and there's much more record management than there ever was back then. So to do an investigation that took a couple hours back in the 70s is now taking a couple of days to complete with much more record keeping than there was back in those days. So.
Thank you. Councillor Judy?
So would you say that our crime rate has dramatically increased since when the detachment was originally built?
I would say the crime rate has gone down. Like most places, it has gone down. We look at our last year, our calls for service have declined, not significantly, but dropped to about 2.5%, I believe, last year. But we look at our number of violent crime. Our violent crime went up last year, went up about 3.5%. So those are the types of offenses that take longer to investigate. But it doesn't, whether it takes, how long it takes to investigate a crime doesn't really affect the space that you're requiring in a building. For an investigator now, when I was an investigator on the street, we worked in a cubby hole, and you worked on a paper file. Now, everybody that's working on a file now requires 2 monitors to switch between the various screens in the electronic file management system. One file that they're currently working on, and then the other file or the other screen that contains the rest of the file that they can access while they're doing the report. So their actual space requirement to do their work is probably 4 times the size it was when I was a constable working on the street. So that has definitely changed.
Thank you. Yes, come forward and state your name, please.
My name's Jim Kirk, and I just have a question. I'm really kind of puzzled here. What is this going to cost me as a taxpayer for this facility to be put into? I mean, we've dropped in population, and it seems that everything else seems to be more drastically of a concern. My concern is, as a taxpayer, whether I can afford to commit myself to something that is not affordable. And what I'm seeing right now, it's just not affordable. And I haven't seen anything tonight where it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
If I could comment on the process for these meetings. I'm not sure if it's the second or the third meeting, but we will be spending time on cost projections for both the police and fire building. Tonight was only scheduled to discuss the requirements that both the RCMP and the fire department are putting forth, and council asked as well that we have the rest of the departments represented by Mr. Horn give an overview of the major concerns in infrastructure. So as this whole process unfolds, we will get around to estimated costs of construction, and also we'll get around to looking at various options for council to consider. But that's a little later on in the process.
Thank you. Yes, Larry, please.
Let me break your discussion down into 2 parts. The security and the not enough room. You broke it down the same. We had $600,000 in the last budget to address the security in the present position, the present facility. I would think that that's the way to go, especially with our population the way it is. So what would we build the building to if we were going to build a new building? Right now, we're probably at a nadir of our population, and we might increase or we might decrease. So I would say that it's better to fix the cells up. Yes, that has to be done. That just has to be in there. There's no question about it. The rest of the building is up to discussion. So the second part would be, why does everyone have to be in one building? Why can't you put clerks, storage space, other things? We've got all kinds of empty buildings all over town. So why not, eventually a new building has to be built for 1 or 2 new buildings. But whether it has to be this year and 5 years, I think in 5 years is a better time to be looking at it. And right now we should just be making do with what we've got.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, firstly, I don't think it would be very effective or efficient to have the administrative staff that looks after the file management working in a separate building from where the investigators are that need access to those same files. And as far as doing a retrofit or rebuilding the cells at the current location, it addresses part of the problem, absolutely. $600,000 is not going to come even close to do that. I think the original estimate was considerably more than that, just on the retrofit alone. Never mind talking about building a new cell block on the adjacent to the existing building. And then, of course, you have to think of what do you do with operations when you're doing that work. Does it shut down the cell block that you currently have, and where do you go after that?
Thank you. Just on that, Your Worship,
Yes.
When we get around to options, that's one of the options that we'll be presenting to Council is the pros and cons of doing any work on the existing building. So that'll be included.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience, please? Yes, sir. Come forward and state your name.
That's George Baker. Inspector Gilbert, I'm curious to know, how often are you transferring people from Prince Rupert cells to Terrace?
That would happen largely on weekends, and it would be it's a service that's done by the Sheriff's Service, and in advance, if we have a prisoner that's remanded provincially on a Thursday or Friday, and we know that they're going to be held for transfer to Prince George over the weekend, we'll contact the sheriffs and we'll contact Terrace Detachment and make those arrangements. I would say it probably happens at least once a month.
And under what conditions do you transfer a cell, lack of a better term, a cellmate, to Terrace?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Let me restate it. So, in what conditions or what kind of crimes would be required to transfer someone? I mean, I can't imagine someone would be transferred there under a drunken and disorderly, but I imagine that a serious crime would probably require you to have him or her under custody for some time.
The people that are transferred to places like Terrace or the Kitimat would be those that are currently under remand by the courts. So if we required to make space in our existing cell block, it'd be one of those prisoners that would go, and then a person that would be released locally would be held in our local cells.
And last question. What kind of cost implications are associated with that?
Well, there's no cost to the city because it's the Sheriff's Service that's doing the escort, but there is a loss of revenue to the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Please come forward and state your name.
My name's Karina Mohart, and I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It was good for the public to actually see what's happening on the inside as well, and I appreciate that. My question is basically with regards to maintenance. After Mr. Horn had done his presentation, just the maintenance of the city buildings, what's actually being done? I mean, looking at those pictures and paint and just regular maintenance, do we not have a maintenance crew?
Thank you.
I'm not sure there was a question there, but...
Not for you, but...
Yes, Your Worship, we do. A limited budget, and that's handled through our building inspection officers. They tour facilities, and when they have money available, they try to keep them as upgraded as they possibly can, but it is on a limited budget covering all of those buildings that you've seen.
Thank you. Yes, Larry, come forward, please.
Would you address the question how large you want to build the building? Because we're at the nadir of our... So what should we build it for? Potentially expanding or potentially contracting or what? And I'm talking, just address the police part of it.
Well, you'd have to build the building at least to what the current establishment is as of today. In the current, the establishment was as high as 36 municipal members, RCMP members. I think that would be prudent to build for some future expansion, but at the same time, I think there's other avenues that could be explored as well with on the provincial side of the house. But that's a conversation that would need to be had with the province with respect to bringing existing provincial resources from the building out on Charlie Curry Way back into the detachment.
Thank you, Bob.
We do have one question, Your Worship, that's come in over the telephone. It's from Tony Briglio at 994 Ambrose Avenue. And his question is, please clarify whether the city has an option of building the RCMP building, because it sounds to me that the city has received one letter or notice from the RCMP as to the state of the current building, and that there will be 2 more letters before the RCMP will build the building anyway and place the burden of the cost on the taxpayers anyway. So could you just clarify what you said at the outset, Inspector Kilby?
Yes. What's happened thus far is in July of last year, the first notice came to the city. There will be a second notice coming in July of this year. And then if nothing has happened in the next year, there'll be the third notice will come. After the third notice, then the province has the option of building a new building. Now, whether they will or they won't is obviously up to them to do that. But at that point in time, the policing agreement stipulates that they do have the ability and the authority to do that and bill back 100% to the municipality.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brigido. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert.
And the next up, Your Worship, is Fire Chief Dave McKenzie. And his trusty deputy.
We don't. I hope that book isn't that thick.
It's full report.
Oh, okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am, of course, Fire Chief Dave McKenzie, and I have my Deputy Fire Chief Jeff Beckwith with me. Basically, we're here just to give a state of what the condition of the city building is, the fire department is, and its requirements that are now needed, and the state that as I said, the building is in, and how it doesn't meet our the operational standards anymore. So we'll go on to the first one. Fire hall was built in 1959. As you can see, the apparatus is sitting on the front apron now. It shows that it doesn't have much room for apparatus placement on the front apron. Along with the lower picture there, it shows some of the staff parking. We are very limited in staff parking and training facilities. Our grounds are very small. A lot of our training has to go off-site. We have to find locations to be able to do some of the training, which makes it tougher to do your day-to-day operations. The size of the hall, when it was built in 59, the trucks at that time were about as big as our rescue van on the far right. As you can see, as the trucks have gotten larger and the equipment that's required to be carried on them, the trucks have gotten bigger, and the building hasn't met up with that. This is just how the apparatus sits in the barn area. The lower left picture, distance between both bays there, we're given a 48-inch. That's between the vehicles themselves. But if you look down, as you go down past that, you'll see how the apparatus doors are open. Everything's touching. We have the furthest door you see, there's actually a pole there, and the way the truck has to park, the door opens up into the pole on either side. So it makes it getting into the apparatus difficult, as it does in the upper right picture. It makes it very narrow for getting into the apparatus. It's only given us a 2-foot width, as it states in the lower, for room. And that truck is that's just one truck in one bay. We'll go on to the next. Now, these all three of these pictures of the are just different angles. The lower left shows we have a 12-inch space between the trucks, and as they park there, on the lower right it shows 6 inches for the back end of the truck to the wall, and that's as much room as we can get aligning these trucks. The bays are much too short and nowhere near wide enough to accommodate the size of the apparatus that is being built today. Here again is our ladder in the very first bay, and it shows that there's very minimal clearance. The lower right shows that as the apparatus comes out, you're within upwards of 3 inches of clearing the door. We've actually had to move piping to allow for clearance for the trucks to come in. That included the last platform truck that we had in there, and this one, the doors are very narrow and there's not much height clearance at all. Moving on to, this is, as the arrow shows, this is our exhaust extraction for our trucks inside the bays. As our trucks fire up and the exhaust comes out, this is what extracts it. This is not new requirements that are met today. New requirements show that we actually have hoses that hook to the exhaust pipes that are magnetically attached and run to a ventilation system that run down a track as the trucks are exiting the building or start up. These fans automatically kick in and extract the exhaust out to the building or out of the building, keeping the apparatus floor clear. And as the trucks leave the floor or the bay, it disconnects just as it's exiting the building. And then upon returning, the truck's being backed in, the hose is hooked up as it's being backed into the apparatus floor, again to prevent poisonous gases or the exhaust fumes from going throughout. As it is now, we do have exhaust that goes throughout the building, and these trucks do fire up. They do leave an exhaust trail, and this flows into our lower floor for our dispatch area and up to the upper accommodations also. Structural deterioration. This is showing how some of the main structures of the building is failing. Where those arrows are now, those are our structural beams that go into our apparatus area. They're deteriorating and rotten. They're failing on their own. Even the concrete building itself, if you look on the upper right by the door, that's how the wall is all the way along, deteriorating. We have leakage in the back of the building with some water coming into the building that we can't stop. We have taken some of the weight load off the structure itself by having the roof repaired a number of years ago, taking the rock roof off and having a new roof put on, which alleviated some of the weight. But we still have a serious issue with the structural integrity of the building. The building itself doesn't meet standards for being seismically safe. Fire departments are becoming an emergency operations center at the same time when there's a major disaster. If there is a major disaster, we'll be rescuing ourselves before we can come out and rescue anybody else. The building is not safe. Their study was done back in 1996, and in the report, this is one of the avenues that was stated that the building does not meet the safety issues for that, and it'll collapse. This is just showing some of the grounds, the deterioration of the grounds. We are sinking. On the lower left there, you can see the puddle there, of course. A puddle in Prince Rupert, who would have thought? That's how the ground is deteriorating and sinking below us. On the right-hand side, we're constantly doing patchwork. The grounds give away, cracking. That is we use that as a combination training, hose testing area, or equipment testing, and due to its size, it doesn't meet the size required, but it is also deteriorating rapidly. Our hose tower, the structure itself is also failing. The hose tower is designed to house all our hose that we do use at fire scenes or when we test to dry. It's over 50 foot in height, and it is also failing. We can only, at this time, they recommend half the capacity load in the tower than what it normally has. We also have a heating system in there that has been operating for 20 plus years due to the age and and getting replacement parts for it for the heater inside the barn. Also, that arrow on the lower left shows that's just the exhaust extraction in the back of the building that comes from the apparatus floor. This is our 911 dispatch center. It's not a proper design. We do have the 911 center in our fire hall, and so all 911 calls, of course, come to here. And we have one dispatcher on duty at all times. It's inadequate. It's cramped. As you can see the monitors on the left, and then on the right, those are their operating systems they need for one dispatcher. Also on the lower right, there's a heater on the wall there. Can you get to that, Jeff? On the lower right. And then underneath the desk on the left-hand side, that's another heater to help supply heat into that room. That's the only means of supplying heat, which is pretty inadequate for the needs, but that's all we have at the time. We have filing systems in there. Lack of storage. We have our fire department filing folders, file cabinets inside that same room, so it makes the room very congested. At the same time, they have to operate it in 24/7. This is our lecture emergency operations center dispatch room. On the left-hand side, we've got lockers, and those are all set up for our dispatchers. That is the only place we can find any room. At the same time, this is also our if there's emergency operation that needs to be set up. It's either set up here in council or we set up directly into our own fire hall, and that is the operating area only. And dispatch also uses it as a lunch area and a food prep area for while they're in operation. Dormitory area, dorm area. The picture almost self-explanatory. It's just it's pretty rough. We have cracks in the walls. The walls aren't dark by the picture. It's just from the exhaust staining from the vehicles. It's tough to get off the walls now from scrubbing. It's just a inadequate area for the fire hall. Storage. Who doesn't have storage problems? We only posted a couple of pictures. These are probably some of the better ones, but left-hand side is the hazmat and our air pack area, along with hazmat suits that hang in there. It's a repair area for hoses and maintenance we do, because we do our own maintenance on our air packs and our hoses is required. Sure. Okay, there you go. Look at that. You get a cookie.
Are you saying that back wall with all the pictures stuck to it is yellow?
No.
The door.
That's the inside of the locker doors that are open.
You're saying something about the exhaust yellowing the room. Is that?
That's where the mouse cursor is now. Those walls were white at one time. They're now stained black. Okay. No, those are inside the lockers. The picture on the right, this is another storage area, but everything from our first aid equipment to our filing systems. We have file cabinets spread all over the building. Any usable space we have, we've got something either stuffed in or stacked on. Our heating system, on the left-hand side, those are the ceiling heaters in our apparatus floor. We have two of those. One of those are only in operation due to not being able to maintain and repair. So we have one that's operating the whole apparatus area. It's very inefficient, not energy efficient at all. This past winter so far, we've had to bring in propane heaters to keep the apparatus floor at some sort of current temperature, so we wouldn't have to worry about the trucks, tanks freezing, and the water freezing inside the tanks, and make it operational for while we're on the floor. The right-hand side is of course, our boiler room. Very outdated. We have to bring someone in to make it operational or fire it up in the wintertime to make sure it's running properly. And then come summer, we have to shut it off because we can't control the heat. The heating system in the building itself is, we've probably only got about 50% rating for operational. It doesn't operate the full heating system due to age and just repair. This is just a couple pictures in our kitchen area. That's not a stain on those on the drawers on the left. That's the paint peeling away. It's been painted so many times. You can probably pick out the many decades of paint that have been put on the put in the building since it's been opened. On the right-hand side, again, that's just areas that are lacking and falling apart. This is in our hallway. The left-hand side is just one of the walls that have been repaired and couldn't be completed. On the ceiling itself, on the right-hand picture, those were skylights that we had in the building that allowed natural light into the building when we had the old existing roof, the rock roof. When the roof was repaired, the skylights were taken due to cost, which eliminated the natural light into the building, and were sealed up, and that was finished product. They didn't complete the finished product on it. That's as far as we could go. One of our back facilities. This is the current condition of our back facilities. Our showers after our shower area and of course our sinks, we've had damage. We've tried to repair. The lower right one is where the light fixtures are above in the facilities. That's a common occurrence. The plaster's coming off and continuous cracking. Again, just another angle, another hole in the wall above the stalls. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory on this one, I would assume. Go on the next one. These here are structural cracks in the building. These are only a few that I've shown. The one on the left is above a doorway that runs to the ceiling, and the one on the right is actually on the ceiling. These cracks run throughout the entire building. We have cracks in different locations. We helped alleviate some of that, as I said earlier, with the repair of the roof by taking the weight of the rock and everything off and putting on a torch-down roof. That eliminates some of them, but we still have them continually spreading. This is our gear room, where all our firefighting gear is. We too have had some damage this winter in the cold snap. When we took the room apart, we found not only we have 3 major water leaks, no insulation in the building, in that area included. We also had asbestos. So not only once we start taking the building apart or the room apart, we have to do asbestos remediation on the building or on that room to get it back into shape, and have wires and lighting replaced because it was fully damaged due to the flood or the broken water line that we had in there. Any repairs that get done in the building now as we keep going on all require, due to the asbestos, there is asbestos in our building, everything from the floor to in our heating system, that all requires remediation to be done at the same time, which is very costly to do. Yeah. In conclusion, the report was just basically give a state on the condition of the building and how it looks now. And there was a report done in 1996 that addressed all these same issues, but due to the economy at the time and still now, we couldn't replace it. So we're just moving forward with letting you know what the state of condition is.
Thank you very much, Dave. Is there any questions from any one of the councillors, please? Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report. The 911 dispatch, does that have to be in the fire hall, or can it be in any other building in town? Like, is there a reason that it's there?
The 911 dispatch originated in the RCMP building, and due to legalities, I'm assuming, I can't remember the full reason why I wasn't in the chief spot at the time, but it was moved to the fire hall. It's an important part of our operating, our day-to-day operations. It allows us, to be able to be more mobile on the road, but it also monitors calls for us. It needs to be in some sort of operating building, emergency services building, and most places our size, that's where they all are. So,
thanks.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to say, we as a parent of a 3-year-old, I'd like to say that we really appreciate your services that you do offer. And in Prince Rupert, we have to realize that these people who are actually presenting aren't actually the villains of the city, because it comes off that way. So thank you for your presentation. I have a couple questions. I wanted to know, can you explain your duties as firemen in the city? Because Do you just fight fires, or do you have other duties?
No, we're not just a fire department. As back in 1959, when that hall would have been opened, typically done, we do everything from hazmat scenarios to first responder medical calls, motor vehicle accidents, which require us to respond as far as Quinitza Station area, halfway out between here and Terrace. There's pretty much, you name it, we pretty much have to look after it as part of the requirement for fire rescue. Other than what the police or BC Ambulance itself fully does, we do everything else on a day-to-day basis.
My next question is the walls with the exhaust. I could confirm, because we went and did a tour there with my son, and confirmed that the walls are actually blackening from the exhaust. Now, that's clearly toxic for the workers, is it not?
It is, yes. It's as I said, the standards now, when you in a facility, you'll have exhaust extraction that actually hooks up to the exhaust pipe of the vehicle. You won't see that in too many apparatus floors anymore. The old system met the requirements of the time, but as a new facility is being built, you got to have this is one of the precautions needed. So you need to have the exhaust extraction put in.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the gallery that would like to come forward and say anything to Dave, please, or ask any questions? Mr. Kerr?
We somehow we've come up to this extraction of exhaust, and I kind of think about the ferry, is that they have a hose that goes out from the exhaust pipe out the door. I lived in the fire hall many years ago, and it's the same fire hall as you're speaking of today. I was an auxiliary, and I have some issues that perhaps many don't know here. I did live in there, and I understand that there are things with an older building, and I appreciate the other things that have been said. Is yes, we have to do something about it, but can I come back to the same thing again? Can we afford to do this right at this point in time? I think what we should do, and I mean this is up to everybody else, because I think this issue should go to the public. The public should make the decision. Do we need to spend all this money? We are rescinding in population. Come on now, our taxes are just going right haywire. I just don't understand how we can keep on affording to do things that we're doing. I notice out on Wantage Road now, on Frederick Street, they've got it closed off. Obviously, they're putting in a new pipeline or doing repair. So where do we put the issue? I say let's go to the water. Let's get that one fixed first. Fire hall and RCMP, let's leave it alone for a little while. And I am kind of concerned why it's going to take 5 meetings to decide what we're going to do. I think basically leave it alone until we can afford to do something. Our population isn't there anymore. We don't have people coming into, should I say, involving with more tax dollars. We don't have that. We have to deal with what we've got. We're not dealing with it properly.
Thank you, Jim. The reason we're having 5 meetings is so that the public can give input to and question what's going on, and so we can feel their response too. I think it's important that we let the taxpayers know what's going on, and they're allowed, to come in and let's talk about it. Yes, Larry.
When the previous council was discussing this, it was put off to this year with the idea there would be a referendum. So are we still leading up to a referendum, or are we going to sort of do it, we're going to pass the bill, and then if you get enough signatures, we'll do an alternative?
Mr. Howley, please.
Your Worship, Council hasn't really made that determination this time around. The 2 options, the city can't borrow any money over a 5-year term without the public's consent, and Mr. Golding's pointing out that there are 2 ways to go there. One is by what's called a voter assent, and that means that you council, alternate approval process. The council can advertise its intent to borrow and ask and publish that, and if 10% of the local electorate on the local voters list object to the project, then it proceeds to referendum. The other method is for council to proceed directly to referendum, and the previous council was considering that. I don't recall an actual motion, but it was certainly part of the discussion around this facility, and this council will make that decision once this process is complete. And I would imagine once we've done all of the work around whatever council decides to look at, it'll be sometime in the fall of this year that council might be in a position to make a final decision to go to referendum.
Thank you.
It was Sheila Gordon Payne who unfortunately didn't run this time, but she actually said you're not going. She said almost getting a commitment from council at that time to say no, we will go through a referendum, which I hope I could find the exact thing. But you're right, it doesn't bind the present council. I would like to suggest that we look at, given the state of our population, etc., that we consider going to a volunteer fire department. I think that should be on the agenda, and it should be part of the discussion, because we can go naively assuming we're going to go back to 20,000 or 15 or 18,000. It's happy-go-lucky. We'll build this huge building, or we can look at the reality of it. We're liable to shrink further. So I think Terrace does it, etc. It should be on the agenda that we look at going to a volunteer. And it might be that we've got so many stakes in the ground right now with people's that it just wouldn't make sense, but I still think it should be on the discussion.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Rouse, please.
I'd like to thank the presenters. I don't doubt that there is a need for 2 new buildings, but as a senior and a person on fixed income, I find it very difficult to accept a 12.5% increase in taxes, and my taxes would be over $5,000. So, on a second point I'd like to make is that I would like the fire department to struggle through with what they have until we've sold our pulp mill, and then we get some income coming back. And I think that would be an incentive for the city to also get this finally resolved and get the pulp mill sold, so we can get on with our lives and our finances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Just state your name, please.
Janet Crocker.
Okay. Thank you, Janet.
I have a couple of points of clarification first that I'd like to ask, and one is to Bill Horn. And I know that Councillor Thurkelson asked you about the Schwatland Dam and the submarine pipe, and you mentioned the cost of the road. I want to know the cost of the upgrade to the dam as well as the submarine pipeline.
The cost of we haven't put all the costs together here, so we're just giving you kind of an outline of the dam and the pipeline is about $6 million. That'll give us access to the dam. The dam, we don't know about what the repairs are going to be yet. There's different kind of options that may be considered. And we're assuming right now, a high ballpark with $5 million for the dam.
On top of the 6?
On top of the 6. But we're not looking at doing that right away. So,
and how about the submarine pipeline?
Again, I haven't got costing for it with me. There is a report on the 2005 infrastructure report on the website that was prepared by Associated Engineering, and in there's some cost estimates involved with that. That would be the easiest place to get the information from at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, my other comments are, as a taxpayer from Prince Rupert, I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Excuse me, could you press your mic?
As a taxpayer of Prince Rupert, I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way, but with a population of only 12,000 people, we have one of the highest per capita property tax rates in the whole province. I also want to point out the priority of this infrastructure meetings and how we have a process of 5 meetings for this one infrastructure project, and why was this project prioritized amongst all the others that listed by Mr. Horn to even have a review of. Also, a question to the referendum, is it usually done to a referendum done if it's a capital expenditure that's amortized over this amount of time?
Well, you have to have one form of voter assent, either the alternative process or go straight to referendum. And it's for any project where the city borrows for money for in excess of 5 years.
Is a referendum standard?
Different municipalities use either method in different situations, and I can't give you a statistic as to how many go straight to referendum or how many go alternative process, but I can say that since the alternative process came in, it has been used fairly often in local government.
Thank you. And I've read this report that was listed on the website, the 2011 infrastructure report, and I was really surprisingly concerned about the Schwatland dams as well as the submarine pipeline. And I know in Prince Rupert we don't really usually worry about water, but even after that last presentation, I'm a little concerned about my drinking water. And according to this report, at last count, it was about $90 million in infrastructure projects. And if we did decide to amortize even that over 30 years, it would most likely cost, at today's low interest rates, double that. So I urge Council to go to referendum on this. And as a taxpayer, I am not willing or able to pay higher taxes. So other options should be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Mr. Holley.
Your Worship, I've got a couple more questions for the fire chief. One's from Brian Hadland, 1840 Atlan Avenue. What will happen to the fire museum if the building is replaced?
Thanks, Brian. Good question. Yeah, we would have to look. The building was built on a grant a number of years ago, added on to the fire hall, and we would have to. I'm not sure what the city's position would be on looking on an addition to the new fire hall, to have this as an addition put onto it to have the fire museum, or if it's put onto its own. So we'd have to. I think we're on a wait and see, or see what the city's decision would be at that time regarding this.
Thank you. And the second one is from Raymond Deschamps at 1073 Hayes Cove. How would the firemen be able to help the people if the building collapses?
Well, first we'd have to see what we get out of the building before we can help the people. As I said, if it's a disaster incident happens bad enough that the building collapses, we have to first rescue ourselves before we can get out and rescue anybody else, and just take it from there. There's no way you can really answer that.
Thank you. Councillor Giron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that the reason we're having these meetings is to gather information, and before the election last year, Council, at least I didn't, and other Council members didn't feel we had enough information to go forward with making an informed decision on the emergency services building. The infrastructure, I think Mr. Horn's just given an overview for everybody to see what really goes on with our infrastructure and where it is and how badly in disrepair some of it is. So, just keep in mind that it's a good evening for people to come out and ask questions, and it's an opportunity for the public to find out what's going on in their community and what these buildings look like. And for council, it's an eye-opener too, because I personally have never been in the fire hall, and I appreciate the photos. Same with the RCMP building. So, it's hard to make decisions when you don't have all the facts. So that's what these meetings are all about, are collecting facts and information in order to make an informed decision. What that decision will be in the end will be on the public input we get too, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. So, I really encourage people to phone in and come forward and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Mr. Gray.
I had a question on the ladder truck, or this vehicle that is that all of a sudden a necessity in a community like Prince Rupert?
We're required to have some sort of elevated apparatus. The last one was our platform, and we've since replaced that due to cost to the and retirement of it to a ladder, which meets that same requirements. It's a multi-use truck, so it's just not a ladder. It's also a combination unit which can be used as a pumper truck at the same time.
And for doing fire inspections and for doing, I see it running around town, because I know when one of the major fires we had in Rupert a few years back, the truck, I guess its predecessor was out of town on a refit when it had never been used. And I'm just questioning whether maybe we have too much equipment or some other equipment could possibly take its place, or buy a pickup truck to use instead of using the most expensive piece of equipment that the fire hall has.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I've got a couple more phone calls. One again from Raymond Deschamps. It's a little hard to read, but he says he agrees that the water should be the number one priority. He supports the RCMP and Fire Hall and proposes that the building for RCMP and Fire be located near the Performing Arts Center, and he's very supportive of the infrastructure upgrades. The second one is from Brenda Layton at 1154 Bill Road. Agrees that RCMP and fire buildings are an embarrassment, believes that population will grow, and residents should bite the bullet and build the new buildings now.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Thorkelson.
I just, again, like Councillor Goron, want to speak to about what the purpose of the meetings are. The purpose of the meetings are to invite the public to hear and to be able to take part in the discussion about, instead of having just a meeting where the public just sits like bumps on the logs and doesn't have a chance to ask anything of our of the senior managers. And we had a great debate on whether this kind of a format would work and whether we should do that. And we have these kinds of meetings, workshops, and this time we thought that we would open it to the public so we could hear. But I really would ask the public to be a little bit politer to our staff. They're not here to be defensive. They're here to answer questions. And Council will not make a decision on anything until September. That's what the schedule is. And so we have a long time to have a discussion on what we think. And I really support a meeting where the public gets to ask questions. But I think that we should be polite to our staff. And right now is the time, is the first meeting. And I would suggest that it's a time where we're all trying to look for information, Your Worship. I haven't been in the fire hall for many years. I certainly have not been in the cells in the police station. I'm sure most of you would be happy to hear. Sure. And I am interested in what the state of our other infrastructure is, because we have to make a decision. Everybody knows there's no money in this town. Everybody knows that. We know that. And that's why we're trying to hold these meetings, to get so that we can all ask questions and come to reasoned decisions and reasoned conclusions. One of the things, Your Worship, that we heard about was, the RCMP building. Council was put on notice last summer that it needs repairs. This summer will be the second year, and next summer will be the third year. Then the province may or may not decide to build at our cost. So that's one of the things that we have to put under consideration when we're deciding what to do and what kinds of things we want to do, and whether we believe that will happen, whether we believe that the RCMP should be working under those conditions and the firefighters should be working under those conditions, whether we can modify those buildings and last another 5 years before we are dripping with, have money falling out of our pockets. So, I mean, those are all the questions that Council needs to ask, and we're having these meetings so that we can, Your Worship, we're having those meetings so that we can make these considerations and make them so that the public can ask. So I really ask, Your Worship, when somebody is rude to our staff, that we remind them that they're only here presenting what they know about their buildings, and they are presenting them to the public at our request. And I really hope that we can be a little bit more politer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorkelson. Is there anyone else, please? Mr. Golden?
I'll be really nice, but
okay. You better be, Larry.
Please. Okay, please. I went to see. I go through the budget, so almost every year we go in. Every year we put money into the fire hall. He was mentioning the roof that we've done. So I went to look at the repairs which have been done, and that file is empty. So I was hoping that just as a matter of course, that we could get the major repairs, say for the last 8 or 10 years, and how much was each, so I can remember when the building breaks down, there's no electricity. So that was the last one I can remember, and the roof and things like that. So I would like to see how much we've invested in. What's wrong with the council process is that every 3 years we get a new group that doesn't wear what the previous group has done, so we lose the continuity. So I'd like to bring the continuity of showing all the money we put into the fire station to bring it up to code or bring it up to usefulness. And secondly and thirdly, I would like to say I still think we should look at going to a volunteer fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Is there any other questions? Mr. Howie?
Nothing else has come in, Your Worship.
Alan Hale from the Northern View again. It does seem like there is some reticence about this emergency building being the #1 project. If the council does decide not to do anything about the buildings, what is a reasonable amount of time, do you think, before the fire department will need a new building? There can't be any more delays.
Thank you.
Wow. That's a $1 million question. The building's been since '96, when the last study was done on the building. It was deteriorating badly then, and nothing's been done except for the new roof to the building since, and it continues to deteriorate. So I couldn't put a timeline on how long the building will last. Will it last a year? Will it last 5 years, 10 years? I don't know.
Thank you.
And to cover the cost on the roof that was replaced recently, that was done out of funds that were actually acquired in 2003 when we actually went south to help with the Okanagan fires, and we were able to make money for wages, and the truck made a numerous amount of money, which covered the cost of that facility at the time. Yeah. And that's there for our operation down there, so that money went actually towards the building.
Good, thank you. Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Kirk, people at home can't hear you back there. That's why we use the mics.
I just have a question, and I seem to think that the auxiliary fire department seems to go into oblivion.
Sir, you have to speak right into the police. It'd be a lot easier to
Oh, I thought I had a big enough voice.
No. even
Almost.
That's better. Thanks a lot.
Okay. No, my question is, and it's always been a pet peeve of mine, is that the auxiliary fire department, which I was part of many years ago, and I'd like to know what the status is today. I heard that there was 3 people in auxiliary and 2 transferred. And if there is one auxiliary, I'd like to know if there's still a department that's looking after the auxiliaries. And I think it's very important. These people are trained. If they're trained in everywhere else in British Columbia to fight a fire, then obviously it works. And I think we're the only community in British Columbia that doesn't have an auxiliary fire department. So why is it? I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jim.
Could you talk to that, Dave? Or I know you're training people.
Is this the time for it? Or?
I don't think. Mr. Howley?
Well, Your Worship, actually, I'd rather have Mr. McKenzie put together a report, and we'll put that in the next council package, and anybody who wants to can read it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Oh, sorry. Councillor Thorkelson?
I was wondering regarding the fire department, if there was a completely volunteer fire department, you still have to have somewhere to house the vehicles, correct? And so if you had somewhere to house the vehicles, what is the additional space requirements? And you'd have to have a place to dry your hoses. Would I be correct to that? So you still have to have that tower. So all this time, all these years, I thought that tower was actually for practicing rescues, and now I find out it was just for drying hoses. That's really a disappointment. But anyway, the what I was so what would you actually, and maybe you can not answer this now, but what would be required in the building for the fire trucks, and then how much, and the hose drying station, and then what would be the additional requirements for living quarters and the rest of the because I'd be interested in knowing if you can break it down like that.
That's something you'd be looking for at a later date, just for me to report on? Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, Your Worship, we'll cover that off at the next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Mohart?
Karina Mohart. Dave, I was just wondering with regards to a lot of these repairs, nothing's been done since 1996. Does the fire hall have to do up some kind of maintenance report that gets passed on to our building inspectors or to our senior management? What is the process there? This is something that I think we seem to be missing some gaps here, because this has been going on for a long time. Even the RCMP building, just regular maintenance. And we do have building inspectors, but are they coming in to inspect as well? But first of all, the first question is for the maintenance, if you needed the drywalling and painting. I mean, that's unacceptable. But, I mean, there's other things, too. Is there a process in place right now?
We put a list of budgetary items that are required every year that we put forward, and it becomes a priority. What are our main priorities? So operational is our number one priority, and then and it goes down from there. So it's just a process of if we have the funds at the time to be able to do it. If it's a major, as we have this one damage in our gear room, we have to fix that. We have to be operational. So that's a priority to get done at the time. But as we have funds available, then we start seeking on the projects that are needed inside the building.
And do Your Worship, that applies to every department and every building? Everyone submits their list of priorities. We review that and come up with a final list that fits within the budget framework.
Thank you.
But there is a list that goes with all the maintenance, because it seems like the lack of maintenance done to even this building too, with some of the repairs that need to be done. I'm just trying to wrap my head around basically just maintaining, and yes, there are going to be priorities, but I know the school district, they've got maintenance guys that go around and basically upkeep the buildings. Is this not done?
It is within the funds we have available. And we look at the list based on first life and safety issues, and then structural issues that may not be life and safety, and then another category that falls into the painting and minor repairs.
Well, even the health issues too, with the exhaust in both of these buildings.
Right. I'm not going to get into a debate with you. Okay. Thanks.
That's fine. It's just information and just observing the presentations. It was very informative, and thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Mr. Golden?
Could we get a ballpark figure on the new truck, which won't fit into the present? How much we paid for that? How many million?
We didn't pay millions. It was $800,000, and it does fit in the building.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please?
Your Worship, we have an email that's come in from Brenda Layton at 115 Bill Road, and she's wondering whether or not the RCMP building is accessible to people with disabilities, particularly those going to victim services. That'd be a Inspector Kilberry question, please.
No, there's no means of getting upstairs where victim services is. So if someone comes into the office that has a disability, i.e. Unable to access stairs, victim services can come down and meet with them in an office on the lower level of the building. There is no buzzer to gain access to the building, no automated door to get access to the building for someone in a wheelchair perhaps. There is a counter, however, at wheelchair height for a person in a wheelchair to speak to somebody at the front counter, but no means to get actually into the building to access that counter.
Thank you. Yes.
And for Fire Chief McKenzie, is the fire hall accessible to people with disabilities?
The lower floor is. The upper floor, no. If they need to come up to administration, we have to come down to them and meet with them in an area downstairs. Somewhat reasonable to come in to meet the needs, but not fully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Adjournment?
That pretty much wraps it up, Your Worship. Yeah.
Okay.
So just call for a motion to adjourn.
Could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Thorkelson, second Councillor Carlick Payne, Pearson, or Payne. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you and good night.